سلام به همگی. ممنون که اومدین. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, great. We have the slides. Hi everyone. Welcome to the 6th Iranian Stanford Professional Symposium, or ISPS. My name is Arezu Keshavars. I am one of the board members of the Iranian Alumni Association, ISA, at Stanford University. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of our organizing committee to our gathering today. Next slide. So ISPS is an initiative that ISA started in 2016. And our mission is to inspire Iranian Stanford community, help them build lasting connections, grow to their full potential as beacons of hope and impactful citizens of the world. More recently, we have expanded our gatherings to include a broader community. We are very excited about having a hybrid format this year. The online component, which is happening for the third time, gives us the opportunity to connect with many of you who are not living in California. In fact, right now in this Zoom call, we have people joining us from all over the world, from Iran, from California, different parts of the US, Canada, Europe. I'm calling in from Iran, and many of the board members are spread out all over the US. So this is very exciting for us. And the in-person component, which is again happening for the first time after 3 years because of COVID, for those of you that are local to the Bay Area, will allow us to have a more intimate gathering once again, and to continue the discussions happening here in person, and to create more synergy among our community members to drive some of these ideas forward. Next slide, please. We have all been going through some very, very hard days in the past 2.5 months. We are deeply saddened by all the violence that is happening in Iran, and we stand in solidarity with the people of Iran. With everything going on in Iran and all the emotions we are experiencing from near and far, I believe everyone feels compelled to do something in their own capacity to drive meaningful change and have a positive impact. For each person, this can mean many different things. We believe that one of the most enabling factors is through education. Quality education is what empowers people, including women and minorities, and gives them the necessary tools to not be silent on their oppression and to demand what they must rightfully have in meaningful and productive ways. Education is what gives people the ability to analyze, think, solve problems, and to come up with reasonable solutions. Given the complexity of the situation and how access to education is not democratic, we think there is a lot of work to be done to achieve greater equality through education in order to drive change and have a positive impact on the lives of people, both at a personal level and at a social level. I hope you will enjoy our program today, learn something new, and most importantly, connect to other inspiring people in our community and join forces in changing our world for the better. Next slide, please. So this is the agenda for our meeting today. Our virtual event will be around 3 hours today. And we'll start with, after their opening remarks, we'll start with a panel discussion with 2 amazing speakers, Elham Moore and Kian Katanfurush. We will have engaging discussions on how innovations in the field of education can help us achieve more equality locally and globally. And Elham and Kian will each tell us about the amazing work that they're doing and how they're working to bring more equality to the education domain. After a short Q&A, we'll have a fireside chat with Professor Shima Salehi of Stanford University, whose academic work is focused specifically on addressing education inequalities and what can be done to overcome the barriers in achieving more access to quality education. Finally, we will have a section called Voices from Our Community, where we will hear from our community members who have experienced education inequality firsthand and they will talk about their personal experience in overcoming the challenges through their educational journey. We will also hear about a recent initiative who is trying to provide greater access to education in Iran in underprivileged areas. Next slide, please. Later in the day, for those of you that are local to the Bay Area, we will have an in-person event at Shalizar Restaurant from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., where you can get together with our speakers and our community members, have dinner, and talk in a more intimate settings. We hope that you use this opportunity to connect to other fellow community members and also to build synergy around some of the topics that we talk about today to enable greater impact and drive meaningful change in the world. Impact is really, really important to us at ISPS, and we believe that the Iranian community at large is very, very powerful, and we should use this power in order to achieve greater impact and change the world to be a better place. We will also kickstart our multi-generational mentorship program tonight at the in-person event, and Bita, one of our board members and our president, will talk more about this at the end of the virtual program, and will officially kickstart the mentorship program at the in-person portion of the event in the evening. It is a multi-generational mentorship program, and we're very, very excited about it. Next slide, please. I would also like to thank our sponsors, the Iranian Studies program at Stanford University and Mr. Babak Pahlavan for their generous support of this program. I also wanted to just make a small note that for all the attendees, except the presenters and the hosts, the videos and audio are off, but you can send your questions to the hosts in the chat during all sections of the virtual event, and we'll collect all those questions, and we'll ask your questions from the speakers in the corresponding sections. So without further ado, let's start the conversation with Elham and Kian.
Thanks, Arazu. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, depending on where in the world you are. My name is Bita Nazanfar, and I'm a board member of the Iranian Stanford Alumni Association. I'm very delighted to introduce our great panelists for today. Elham Moore is the president and CEO of Keep Children in School, a nonprofit organization which was founded in Los Angeles in 2010. Elham Jan, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me. This is a great cause. This is a great panel, and it's my pleasure to be speaking here today. My name is Elham Moore. As Bita Jun mentioned, I'm the president and CEO of Keep Children in School Foundation. I have been involved with them since almost its inception, formally in 2010, but they've been working since the early 2000s unofficially. I've been a volunteer and a donor, soon joined the board, became the chairperson of the board, and as of last year, I assumed the role of president and CEO. Education has always been my passion. When I was in Iran, I always taught. I taught at my own school. I taught to students. I taught at orphanages when I was in college. I felt the power of education and having a specialty can transform someone's life. And when I came to the US, I tried to continue on that passion by being mentors in Los Angeles and in underserved areas of Los Angeles. KCIS gave me a focus to focus on Iran because it's always been a passion of mine. But the side projects also continue. Thank you, Vijay. I think we can chat more during the panel.
Okay, it seems that Bita will get disconnected. I hope that she comes back soon, but I'll want to use this time to ask Kian to provide us with a brief introduction of himself and how did he start his journey in education.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Arezu and Bitojun. I'm Kian. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Workera. I'm also a lecturer in the Department of Computer Science at Stanford University. Just like Ilham Jun, I've been following in my life a passion for education, for progress and technology. And prior to Workera, I worked closely with Professor Andrew Eng, who was my graduate studies advisor. And in 2017, I joined him in starting a company called deeplearning.ai with the goal of democratizing access to AI education for both technical and non-technical professionals. Together, we've taught AI to over 3 million people around the globe between deeplearning.ai and Stanford activities. And one of the primary challenges that students would tell us about when asked, what is the limiting factor to build your career, is that content is not anymore the limiting factor. There's an ocean of content out there. You've heard of Coursera, Udemy, Udacity. There's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of contents for every skill you want to learn. But really, people have challenges related to skills. What skills do I have? What skills do I need? Can I measure myself? Can I get some sort of guidance or curation? And this motivated the creation of Workera. Workera is about 1,000 days old, roughly. It's about 3 years. And today serves 25 large enterprise customers and growing. And we raised about $25 million to date. And I'm very excited to participate in this event. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. Sorry, I had internet difficulties. So, okay. So the first, we will have a few questions, and we'll take turn between Ilham and Kian to answer them. So the first question I had is for Kian, which is, what are you most passionate about in the field of education?
I would say I speak about workforce education specifically because it's my focus at the moment, as opposed to childhood, K-12, higher ed or university level education. But often people think of workforce education as online learning. So you hear about large online learning platforms, but there's a lot more to it. And in fact, workforce education is very fragmented. So you have these online learning providers that create courses, Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, as I was mentioning. You also have learning management systems. For those of you who are at Stanford, you may use Canvas, for example, that are essentially containers for your content with some administrative features. And you also have learning experience platforms, which are the more modern version of learning management systems in the enterprise for the workforce. You also have HR information systems. Maybe some of you are familiar in your role, in your job, with Workday, with SuccessFactors, with some of these platforms. And there's even ATSs, applicant tracking systems for interviews, like Greenhouse or Lever. And then you have another category that is really emerging, and that's where my passion lies and my focus is at the moment, which is skills intelligence or skills measurements, which is, you can think of as the data layer for skills or talent in an enterprise and for each employee. So essentially, it's really about understanding someone's skills in order to help them in a formative manner, provide them granular feedback, and help them understand where they stand and what to learn next and where to learn it next. I think a lot of value will be created in the next few years through skills measurement and intelligence.
Okay. So, can you elaborate on one of them, like one of the examples that you mentioned a little bit?
Yeah. So if you think about skills intelligence, with the rise of data methods, today we are able to measure skills across the globe at large scale. which allow us to build a massive graph. Imagine a massive graph literally with individual skills. And because you're measuring so many people across granular skills, you can understand the cross correlations between those skills. So let me give you a simple example. If I ask a student to do 2 times 2 and they say 4, I don't need to ask them 2 plus 2. I don't need to ask them 2 minus 2. I can infer all of those skills. So essentially, because I've collected enough data, I can make skills inferences on a lot more skills than I can measure. So today at Workera, for example, in about an hour of measurements, we can measure tens of skills, but predict hundreds of skills for someone at a very reliable and valid level. And I think the more data is collected, the more people are engaging with those platforms, the more we can provide rich feedback to people so that they are aware of, their unknown unknowns. What are the skills that I don't know about, that I may not have, that make me successful in my job? Yeah.
That's very interesting. Extract the talent and help them how to improve.
Yeah, it's almost like a collective intelligence, if you will, using the skills of everyone to better understand an individual's skills.
Yes. Okay. Elham Can, what are you most passionate about in the field of education?
When I started working in the field of education, unofficially, even without knowing that I'm working towards that goal, it was changing someone else's life. As a result, changing their whole world, literally. Our mission at KCIS is to break the cycle of generational poverty through the powerful use of tool of education. And I can paint a picture for you here to make it more tangible how emotionally entangling it can be and how emotionally satisfying and gratifying it can be. To keep you going and keep you passionate on this path. A teenage boy selling trinkets or cigarettes on the streets, when they get older, they could get approached by someone who would offer them more money if they can move drugs. And because of the financial circumstances of the family, they may accept. Most often, those people get involved in drugs themselves. And that is the life path they will have. Now, we have an example of a teenage boy who was extracted from that system, and it was sponsored through an educational program. That kid remained in school, finished middle school, finished high school, participated in concours, and got into medical school at Tehran University. Decided to get a specialty and a subspecialty. So now he's a neurosurgeon in the Sina hospital in Iran. Very highly technical expertise and specialization that he has. And it's just 2 pictures of a boy who would have ended on the street, probably an addict, or a boy who is a highly respected surgeon in a hospital lifting a community. So by changing their world, they're changing their perspective, their prospects. You basically change their whole world. I always wanted to change the world. I thought my mission for being on this planet is that is what, when somebody asked me when I was 17, I came up with that answer. That is probably the purpose of us being on this planet, but I don't have the money or the power to change the whole world. But if you change one person's life, you change their whole world. In a way, you do change the world. And that is what keeps me passionate and excited.
That is very, very exciting and rewarding. So, Elham, this question this time for you. How has educational learning changed in the past 5 years as a result of COVID or other trends? And
Shall I? Well, I think something that has changed in the past 5 years, even before COVID, or maybe a little more than 5 years, is the impact of technology on education and how it has expanded exponentially the impact that you can make. It is an immensely powerful tool. And during COVID, it became a make it or break it situation for many of the students. Before COVID, maybe it provided more access to those who could have that type of access or could afford it or had the means to it. But during COVID, it wasn't necessarily a luxury anymore. It became a necessity. And that if you have access to technology, internet, or equipment, you have access to education or not. So it was basically a 0 or 1 situation. Many organizations were, including us, were able to take advantage of the power of technology and put in resources in investing in technology to take access to many remote areas in the country. We have a program right now that is deployed in the most underserved areas in Iran, mainly in Sistan, Baluchistan. That was only possible because of technology, a basic literacy application on a tablet that you can take anywhere that, whether there's a school or not, whether there's a teacher or not, you just can take this tablet with this content and create a different world. I have to mention, though, that technology is reducing, online education, remote learning is reducing the human touch, which is a negative for the people who would have had the opportunity to have it otherwise, maybe, or maybe diminishes the human experience. But again, for a lot of our target groups, it's not a luxury of having the alternative. It's whether this or not. So also the scalability of education with technology is not comparable with the one-on-one binary traditional.
So in your area of work, is it fair to say that the negative mental effects of COVID has not been as much as the positive effects in this regard?
Correct. And it was actually a combination of technology and the other programs that we have, like dedicated professional social workers who would address some of the mental and emotional challenges that the students have been going through. However, technology was basically the tipping point. It just tipped the scale. That is for sure, yes.
Thank you very much. So Kian, how about in your organization? How has the educational learning changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict for future? I know you said your company is only 3 years, but yeah.
Yeah. So last 5 years, and specifically due to COVID, learning went online. I think U.S. government, Department of Education has sound like a crazy statistic saying that the number of people learning online in undergraduate studies doubled within 6 months of the pandemic. It's incredible from a certain perspective that COVID has accelerated the approach to online learning. But beyond that, I would say the biggest trend I've seen in the last 5 years is blended learning. It's just people accepting that you don't learn through courses only. So you don't build a career by taking course 1, course 2, course 3, course 4, etc. Blended learning is all about different touch points and just agreeing and understanding that you build a career through variety of learning activities. You take a class, you read a book, you listen to a podcast, you have an hour of coaching session with your manager or your mentor. You also talk to a peer and you just brainstorm on a project that may be guided or may be open-ended. And this is really the realm of blended learning. in terms of what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years, I think that the first trend is overflowing content online. Creator economy is real. You will have more and more content online. I don't know if you've seen what OpenAI just released, this week with ChatGPT, or GPT-3 earlier this year. But this will make it easier for all of us to create content. It's a good thing. It also means there's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be a lot of poor content out there. And if you had to spend 1 hour of your time learning, you better decide accurately how to spend it. It's going to be a very valuable time. And so the first trend will be around curation, being able to vet content, identify where to spend your time in order to align with your career goals as a student, as a professional. The second trend, I think, will be around skills measurement. I already talked about it. Being able to understand your skills will be what will help you curate what you want to do in your career. But I think there is a bigger thing that will happen within education, and the fun thing with education is in Farsi. There's actually 2 words that describe education. You have tadris, which is education in the university, if you will, and you have tarbiyat, which is education at home. And a lot of the last 10 years were focused on providing tools for tadris, for education in the university. But you are realizing, and nowadays, both in France, where I ended up growing up, and in Iran, you have concours, which is on paper a very fair and standard way to evaluate people. You're essentially ignoring gender, you're ignoring socioeconomic background, you're ignoring everything, and you're saying everybody has to go through the same test, and we'll select people like that. Yet, in France, when you look at the top 3 schools, you realize that 2/3 of the students come from a family that has attended that school, which sounds like completely crazy. But the primary reason is because all the effort has been focused on providing tools for tadris, for education in school. But you realize that a lot of what happens around socioeconomic inequality happens at home. And in fact, when certain students are helping their parents at the local shop, it's a very different education you get at home compared to if your parents are pushing you to read books constantly. While someone may be playing video games, and I love video games, I'm not saying anything against it, other students or kids will be learning and building a lifelong learning mindset. And so I think in the next 10 years, you'll have a lot more tools that will make it directly in the household, directly for the parents. And I hope that we won't get into a situation where only the parents that are educated enough see the value in investing in their education of their children, but actually you will make these tools so accessible, so cheap, that every parent will be able to provide some sort of mentorship or guidance to their kids through technology.
Okay, so maybe this is the best transition to my next question then. So what do you think is the biggest barrier to achieving education equality?
For me or for Elham? You want to go?
For you, please.
Okay. Biggest barrier, I would say, probably on the public side, slow, lack of decision-making in governments and public authorities. I will give you the example of the French government a few years ago removed math as a mandatory part of the high school curriculum, which sounds crazy in a world where the job categories that require math are at an all-time growth. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, they actually reverted the decision, which is great, but I'm just showing you how the discrepancy is in there. In fact, there's also a lot of problems in the mismatch between the supply of skills in a country and the demand for skills in that country. For example, there's a lot of countries where today you are training twice as many physical educators as the number of jobs that these people will have after graduation. 4-year degree, and you end up not having a job in what you've studied for 4 years. It's very frustrating. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money from the governments. And it's also a huge impact on the financial life of people who are studying in these categories. So that's what I'm most worried about on the public side. Yeah.
Okay. Elham, what do you think?
I think the biggest challenge in achieving education equality is to create a level playing field for everyone. Financial circumstances of families contribute to an uneven playing field. Being a minority, being a refugee, being a girl, a lot of times puts you at a disadvantage where, for example, Kian mentioned concours. There's a concours, a standardized test for everybody, but not everybody, and everybody's running towards this finish line, but not everybody is starting at the same place, or the path for some of these people is a lot more bumpy than others. So how do you create or try make an attempt of creating a level playing field for everyone? And I think it's allocating resources. Resources are basically time and money. There are many people who may have the interest or have the specialty to help, but you need resources to bring everybody and use those resources. At KCIS, we have recognized this from very early on. We are one of the pioneers actually in education equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion before it was even a thing. We have about 60% girls and 40% boys, and it doesn't mean that we discriminate against boys, but there are a lot more girls who show academic potential. We have 21% Afghan students supported through our sponsorship program. We have a standalone program to support Afghan refugees and other undocumented immigrants in Iran, which are mainly Afghan, who are probably the first organization to buy the first school dedicated to Afghan students in Tehran this year. And we are committed to expanding our program for them. So we at some point, the goal was to identify people who show very high academic potentials, but then we realized no, changing the lives of the students does not have to depend on whether they are the star students or not. You can get an A student and take them to the next level. You can take a B student and take them to the next level. You can take a C student or a school dropout and keep them in school. So, so we try to remain very basically democratic in terms of who our audience is, with a special focus on those who have disadvantages that are not anybody's fault, but puts them at a disadvantage, makes it harder for them to achieve the same standardized goal that is set for everybody.
You still need to have some like selection process because of the limited resources, I assume, but you're saying you're changing your standards, basically, what you look for when you select people. Is that, did I understand what you're saying? Correct.
Yeah, actually, this has been a change that has happened years ago, or this, not a change, I have to say a transformation. When you have a resource, when KCIS first started with 3, 5 to 10 students, of course, you know, there were students who were referred to the sponsors here as people who have high academic potential, but at a risk of dropping out. But then when the organization grew to 50, 70, 100, 200, the perspective started to shift too. So what about the brother or the sister who does not show that same academic potential, but they still like to be in school, they still like to go to school and learn, but they may not become the next rocket scientist, and that is fine. They may become, I don't know, a receptionist at a firm, maybe they become whatever they may become, but they will end up at a place much better and a lot different than where they started. And that is what matters most.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Kian, so can you tell us how has your work helped to address education inequality, and in what domain, like gender, socioeconomic, ethnic?
Yeah. So the the work we do at Work Here, I'll first talk about, obviously how we hire, how we make sure we build a diverse team. But I think that if you look at computer science, which is what, digital skills, which is where I spend most of my time right now, there's a huge gender gap, for example. And when you trace back the origin of that gender gap, you realize it does not all happen at the workforce level. It happens through the life of a person. So if you look at people who go towards scientific majors in high school already, if you look at the majors that they choose in undergrad, if you look at the people who do graduate studies, if you look at the people who take certain jobs, at every step of the funnel, there is an additional bias that is being introduced. So what we can do as leaders is obviously not solve the entire funnel ourselves, but really for every leader at different step of the funnel, take initiatives, build programs in order to make sure you maintain the right, limited bias, limited gap at your level. And so when I look at it at the workforce level, for us, it's really creating programs in order to hire people from diverse backgrounds, from diverse genders, from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, etc. And this takes, for example, several methods. You hear oftentimes positive discrimination. You hear oftentimes apprenticeship programs. You hear things like what we do at Work Here. We try as much as possible for every role to source as many males as females, as many people from different socioeconomic background, and then we standardize the hiring process so that on expectation we should have as many chances to get a male or a female on the job. And so there's a lot we do on that front. And then on the vision of the company, well, because we're focused on skills measurement, what we dream of is to build a world where career and employment decisions are not based on personal network. Today, a lot of people will get a job because they know someone, or they will be hired because they look like the person who hires them or sound like the person who hires them. And all this work we're doing around skills is in order to remove all that bias and to make sure that in the future, career and employment decisions are not based on personal network who you know, they're based on actual skills that are measured and verified. So that's a big part of our work. Yeah.
Yes, that's very, very important. So what are the most critical responsibilities? Yeah, this is for Kian.
Sorry, Bita, can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear. Sorry, I couldn't catch the question.
Yeah, today the air is very unstable. So the question is, what are the most critical changes that we must make to face the future effectively?
I would say the first one is around, building more tools for tarbiyat, for education at home. I think that's very, very important to that will equalize a lot of things that we haven't been able to equalize. Mm-hmm. The second part is really, I'm excited about this chat GPT, AI, generative AI technologies. And let me tell you what I think will happen and why we need a critical change.
Can you also elaborate on the chat, the one that you're saying, chat GPT?
Chat GPT. So today we are seeing the rise of many technologies that use generative artificial intelligence. They're also called foundation models or large language models that allow you to just generate paragraphs of text that is extremely well written on the topic that you'd like, answer the question that you'd like. You can generate pictures, videos soon. There's a lot of assisted technology that allow people to create more with less time or less knowledge. Essentially, that is what I'm talking about. And one of the funny thing about it is, you know how instructors at school, they hate it when students go on Google and find answers to the homework on Google and then copy paste. Well, this will be 10x worse in the future, because now it's not only about going and Googling, it's about just starting a paragraph with a sentence and clicking on a button and letting the AI write an incredible essay that you would never have been able to write on your own. And on the one hand, you would argue this is a great equalizer, because everybody will write the same thing, right? It's all about AI. But on the other hand, it's also a risk, because instructors are asking now, how do we evaluate students? How do we teach students? What are the new skills that they need to succeed? In fact, there is a job category, content marketing or copywriter, people who write, which is at risk today. I would not advise the next generation to build a career in content marketing, if I'm honest. I would tell them that the skills on that category are completely shifting because of technology. And so I guess what I want to say about this technology is that instructors will not be able to stop it. Just like you cannot stop a student to go on Google for a homework, you will not be able to stop a student from using AI for their homework. And so, in other words, this revolution that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be student-led, because the students are not going to let the choice to the instructors, and the instructors will have to adapt to what the students are doing. And so there's a lot of things that will happen, and a critical change that needs to happen from the instructors in how we evaluate skills, how we measure people, and what we teach them. In fact, you may want to teach people to use AI effectively rather than measure them on things that a human cannot do better than AI. And on the equalizer side, what I'm especially excited about is, and it's very relevant to the Iranian community. I think as a community, one of the unfortunate things is many of us, including myself, are not native English speakers. We're just not. And this has a direct impact in our ability as a community to reach top executive positions in the enterprise. And you look at it, there's very few Iranian executives, unfortunately, in companies, too few in comparison to the talent that there is in the community. And with these technologies, you will be able to write beautiful, communication paragraphs, just like if you were a native English speaker. And I think it will open a lot of doors to people who can use them and who can leverage them. And that's why I think it will be a great equalizer from that perspective. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Elham, can you also answer from your perspective?
Sure. I think, maybe the biggest tool that we need, again, time and resources, but what change we need to make in our perspective is in order to have continuity and have the results, we have to be patient, and results cannot happen fast. For example, you hear this a lot. Women are 50% of the population, so why don't we have 50% women CEOs today? When you go back 20 years ago to graduates of colleges who would probably have relevant skill sets, who would make them CEOs today, people who would be probably, I don't know, average age of CEOs, not founders, but CEOs, maybe in the 40 to 55 range. When you go back 20, 30 years to see their college graduates, there were not 50% women graduates. Kian actually mentioned lack of CEO, like Iranian CEOs, based on the talent that exists, or basically the qualification or the merit that exists. So if we want to have 50% of the population who are women to be qualified on a merit-based condition to assume the CEO positions, we cannot start making changes in hiring processes to hire CEOs only. Those should take place, but we have to go back 10, 15, 20 years into middle schools, into high schools, and plant the seeds there. I am a big believer of doing it right, and doing it right takes a long time. You have to plant the seed now in a 15-year-old's mind, in a 14-year-old mind, and stick with them throughout their middle school's ups and downs, through the challenges of high school, through the challenges of changing a major, the fear of entering these fields that they have no role model in the families or, you know, immediate connections. So it's very fearful to enter a domain that is very unfamiliar. And for many of these girls, they don't have a role model. They don't have anyone in their family maybe to have gone to college. So they don't have that perspective or view of the future of what it could be. So you stick with them through different programs, educational programs, mentorship programs that are relevant to their age, and then guide them so that they become the qualified person who would assume the role of the CEO when it is time. But we don't have the patience, and a lot of times the people who support an initiative also don't have the patience. They want fast results. So a lot of the times you see the organizations, maybe the ones that are, well, we're talking about education, that are focused on education, they also gear towards getting fast results. Okay, so what can I do to get the money from this donor, and in 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, I can send a report, an impact report, and show a big impact. And I'm not saying that those are not impactful projects or initiatives. I'm sure they are, but the ones that make it a big difference in the future, the change that we want to see in the future, take a lot more time. And we need to be patient. We need to have continuity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So moving to the questions from the audience. So one question is, as Kian mentioned, there are a lot of learning resources. What about mentorship resources? What about connecting the mentees and mentors? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. Thank you, Mohsen, for the question. Mentorship is very important. It's very close to my heart. And it's a huge issue. One of the issues in mentorship is the ratio between mentors and mentees. In fact, if I give you a story, a few years ago at Stanford in the computer science department, we started seeing so many students from every department coming to the computer science department to take classes. And we realized we're in a situation where there's not enough PhD students to mentor the flood of undergraduate students that are coming. I think the ratio when we computed it back of the envelope calculation was 1 to 50 or something, like 1 mentor for 50 students, which is not tractable. And so what do you do in those cases, which is the case in many fields? You start thinking about building a mentorship pyramid. And that's where measurement is coming in. Is you don't look at people as mentors versus mentees. You look at people on a line of proficiency, from the highest proficiency to the lowest proficiency, and then you measure everyone. And then you realize that what you want is to have the highest proficiency people mentor the second level of highest proficiency, the second highest proficiency to mentor the third level of highest proficiency, and so on. And now you end up with a ratio with maybe more palatable, more closer to 1 to 3, 1 to 5, maybe, where a mentor can actually provide enough value to a mentee. And I think as measurements will improve, both in the workforce and in schools, mentorship feasibility will improve as well. Yeah.
Thanks. So the next question, again from the audience, is for Elham. So what are the ways to empower individual educators or agencies to deliver training from like K-12 to workforce?
To empower educational agencies?
To empower individual educators.
Oh, individual educators.
Yeah.
So it's actually a two-way street because, for example, we are an organization, we have a lot of volunteers. We thrive on having volunteers volunteer for us. But we have social media, we have reach outs, but it is a two-way street. You have to reach out to us so that we know the dots would be connected that way. And then all of those things could happen. Just if somebody is an educator and if somebody is passionate about this, just being with a group of people who share the same passion and share the same interest, and bring in the professionalism and the experience, the field experience, would just be enough to fuel people to basically take part and participate and move on that path. However, a lot of times, and I mentioned resources many times because, as cliche as it may sound, everything that we talk about here, everything that Kian talked about here, doing all of these requires resources. It requires somebody's time, or it requires money to pay someone to spend the time. So with these games, money, resources, again, time, is always can be a game changer, because there may be some people who are very passionate about this, but they cannot afford to spend so much of their time on this passion. So if you have the resources to maintain them, then they can use their expertise and their passion to help others.
So basically,
connect. We reach out, you reach out, we connect, and we'll see how we can make a synergistic partnership.
You try to find the missing dots and fill in.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next question is for Kian. People are asking, you said in France, top few schools, most of admitted are from families who attended them, but how has the trend been for the socioeconomic representation?
So I wish I had learned the statistics by heart, and I could give you a clear answer here, but I don't know. I can confidently say that socioeconomic representation is highly correlated with if the family attended the top 3 school. And so I would say the trend has been the same. I bet that if you, in fact, I give you a story. I ended up attending one of these French schools, and I remember that as I was going to the school, in the train, the metro that will take us to the school, I would probably see 60% Black people in the train that goes to the school. I enter the school and I see 2 Black people in the entire school. This just tells you how discriminative the system is. I don't have the statistics, but I can tell you that it is not good enough. Yeah.
Can I add something to that? Even though I do not know the stats about France, but I just want to point out that this discrimination can be completely unconscious, and it can be just, even if it's merit-based, maybe some people who get there to qualify for those schools, needed the preparation that others from different socioeconomic backgrounds could not have that type of preparation. So they couldn't have the same grades maybe in the exam, or, there could be some bias, but there could be or maybe I'm asking a question. Do you think it's all bias or discrimination, or do you think that part of even the people who get there on a merit base is because of the advantages they had beforehand, and some people did not have that advantages?
The initial condition.
Yeah, Not everybody's starting on the same place, and then some people get there, some people don't get there.
Yeah, for sure. I would say one example is the richness of the vocabulary that people have when they go to school. Even when you're 6-year-old and you attend your first day at school, you realize clearly the difference between kids that use certain words that other kids have never heard of.
Yeah,
that's already from there. you are treating two students the same way, despite them having a significant discrepancy. And that's what I mean by it has to go back to tarbiyat, to education at home, where you need to provide the tools to the families that are not maybe as educated, unfortunately, because of all life circumstances. A lot of the generation of our parents grew up in a revolution. They had so many hard times. They couldn't probably graduate from the university, has an impact on their entire life. Well, can you provide the tools to these families so that they catch up with those who had more opportunity at home to learn? I think that's what will make the biggest difference.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So the last question I would like to ask each of you, let's start with you, Elham, and then follow with Kian. So what is one piece of practical advice you would give to someone starting out in the education space?
I would say if they're just starting out, definitely take the time. Again, be patient. Don't want to reach big achievements and goals in a short period of time. Pay the dues, do the due diligence. By that, I mean, talk to people who have been in the field before, long before you. Use their experiences, maybe even volunteer for them or intern for them and learn from them. And be patient and have the continuity. But don't just get in there for fast results. Be there for the long run.
Okay, thank you. Kian.
Yeah, I will narrow the question a little bit to education technology, just for the sake of providing an actionable advice, because education, I think, is so big. Like you can do so much. First, I would say best time right now, best time to start a company, to start a project, to start a career in education. It's going to change incredibly in the next 10 years. The second piece is, I would say, before you choose what to delve into, make sure you understand education technology. It's such a complex market. You may be starting something, you will realize it already exists somewhere. So spend the time, read, follow the leaders, go on Twitter, follow the top educators, go on LinkedIn, follow the top voices, and then start learning what's going on out there. Should I focus on measurement? Should I focus on content? Should I focus on classroom education? Should I focus on learning analytics, learning engineering? There's just 1,000 different subcategories under education, and make sure you find something that you're passionate about and that will not be irrelevant in the next few years, but is actually in the trend of time. Yeah,
interesting. Thank you. I would like to thank both of you for the very fruitful discussion. So those of us in Bay Area are looking forward to meet Kian in person in the evening. Unfortunately, we can't have Elham because she's not local in Bay Area. So with that, let's hear from Alborz and Shima for the fireside chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bitogen. Thank you, Elham.
So much, Bita. Thank you so much, Kian. That was wonderful and a very interesting discussion. So I think we're going to move now to the fireside chat sort of section of the program. We are very fortunate, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Shima Salehi of the Stanford Graduate School of Education. I actually met Shima a very long time ago, my sophomore year, when she came to Stanford for her graduate school. And we spent a number of afternoons in the bookstore with Shima introducing me to many Farsi idiomatic expressions. So thank you so much for those, and thank you so much for joining us today, Shima. So let's start at the very beginning. Give us sort of an overview of your life story up to when you got to graduate school. We might have to unmute.
Perfect. Sorry, I was muted.
Sorry about that.
life story is such a big question, but let me just tell the journey from where I started in undergrad and where I am now. And I don't know how it would unfold in future. First, thank you, Alvarzan, for the nice introduction. Same as many Iranian in this call and many Iranian in the area, I have a technical background. I did my undergraduate in electrical engineering, but for graduate school, for a number of reasons, I decided to switch gears and switch to education. So one of the reasons was that I ended my undergrad around green movement, green revolution, as some people would call, and the fragmentation caused in the society called for a very deep reflection on an individual level and societal level. And I was lucky on that time to have a very charismatic teacher, Professor Ali Naqi Shaikhi, that many of you on the call know. And he started talking about how education would have more fundamental impact on society rather than, being a good engineer. And same as any young undergrad, being easily inspired by a charismatic teacher, I was like, great, sign me in. How can I study education? So to switch from electrical engineering to education, I first did a master at Stanford. It is called Learning Design and Technology, which is a bridge between technical fields and social science and educational fields. Then after my master, I did a PhD in learning science and technological design. And through that, I make the shift from more technology side to the theory that inform developing technology and using technology. And right now I am assistant professor at the School of Education at Stanford. And my research mainly focuses on how we can create a bridge between cognition and learning theories and instructional practices to use evidence-based instructional and also institutional practices that create learning environments that are inclusive for every learners and create equal opportunity for everyone to grow, to follow their passion, regardless of background, what family background they're born to, and what are the color of their skins. So that is the bird's eye view of my journey.
Very cool. I'm excited that we'll be delving more also into this inclusive aspect. The transition you had from electrical engineering to education was pretty interesting, and I know that sort of early on also, like while you were pursuing the master's program you mentioned, you also were involved with founding this organization, company called Class Dars. And I was sort of interested with, what the motivation was behind that, what a little bit for those who might not be familiar, Class Dars is, and sort of what your motivation was behind sort of creating it and your experience with the project.
Absolutely. So for those of you who do not know about Class Dars, also known as Khan Academy Farsi, it was short, free, online educational videos that mostly cover high school as well as some undergrad courses. And it is free. We used to have the website, and now also the videos are on YouTube and Takht Safid, which is the Iranian version of YouTube, because YouTube is filtered, and just we try to provide quality instruction about the topic in different courses to students. But what is the story behind the starting Class Dars? And the story is quite personal and goes back in life for me. My mom is a primary school, elementary school teacher. And you might not know about the structure of the education system in Iran. If you're a teacher, especially primary school teacher, you would start teaching in a remote areas. And as time passes, you become more senior teacher, you move closer toward urban areas, and eventually toward the end of your career, you would be teaching in cities. So as a result, any teacher would have the experience of going to very remote areas and teaching. And it happens that when I was very young, my mom was teaching in a very remote areas. And I don't know why, for some reason, there were days that I was not in a school and she would take me to the remote areas that she was teaching. And I am very thankful and also very impacted by those experiences. Those few years, those few days created impacting results on me, because even though I was very young, I was shaken by observing the differences between education experience I had and the education experience my mom's students had. It would be the classes that didn't have the proper heating system, that we hear a lot about the fire caused by heating system, the classes that were, it wasn't one class per grade, it was multiple grades in one class. And that jarring contrast remained and left a very impactful memories for me. So fast forward, I am in high school myself. I did my high school in Iraq. It is not a very small city and also very close to Tehran. And I went to what is known as the best high school. But the last year of high school, we have this course in math branch that is called analytical geometry. It is quite a challenging course, and it happens that halfway through the year, they realize, oh, we don't have a teacher to teach that course. And I was like, great, so how am I going to study it for concours? So I had to study it myself, and I was lucky that at that time, Dr. Farhad Meysami was founding this organization, this educational organization called Andishe Sazan. And they were creating and curating amazing educational books for people to study different topics from scratch. And the only reason I could study analytical geometry, I could, handle it in concours, university entrance exam, is by having access to Andishe Sazan. And thanks to the effort of Farhad Meysami, I just want to use this time to give a kudos to him, because he has spent so much time on providing equality in education. And later on, he switched gears to look at more fundamental issues in societies. And in the past 6 years, he has been in prison, but is still an inspiring figure. So thanks to Farhad Meysami, I was able to overcome inequity that I faced in my high school. But then I thought, if me in this quite well-established city and high school did not have access to the teacher that I needed for studying this topic in high school, what is the case for the student my mom had in the remote areas? Who would be teaching them high school materials? And so that was a lingering question. And when I came to Stanford, Khan Academy was just started. And it was 2010 that Sal Khan gave a talk in GSB. I was like, oh, that sounds great. Free educational short videos that we can record about high school topics and put it online. And then people who do not have quality education, or any education for that matter, as Elham was mentioning, for some of these students, they do not have the classroom, they do not have the teacher. So if we can put up that online videos and create, maybe we can help them. So after the talk, I ran into Sal Khan and said, that's excellent. Can I do it in Farsi? And he said, sure. We would love to expand Khan Academy to other languages. And so I was lucky that at that time, it wasn't only me that had passion. There were a group of my friends who also, because of having personal stories and motivation, they were invested. It was, I would say, if I may name them, so I would give credit, it was Sahar Nasirpur, Sahar Nasiri, Reza Nasirpur, Ayreza Sharafat, and Muhammad Akbarpur, who were also invested. And together we started the class dars, and we were also so lucky to receive support from the community. For example, Pendar Yousefi, who is a great designer, said, I will design the whole materials for the website, whole design of the website, which we were very lucky because none of us knew how to do it. So that is how Class Dars started.
Wonderful. And I'm sure Meysami and everybody must be so proud for what they've sort of inspired, as a next generation of education. And I'm sure you must have gotten feedback from people about Class Dars. People must have. Have you heard back from people who took those courses or saw those things?
Yes, and those feedback has made me sure that Class Dars is the most impactful project that I have done, and I'm very sure I will be doing, because by the time that we had the count of the videos, more than 7 million people had watched the videos. But after a while, we just lost count because people started downloading the videos and distributing on a kind of a crowdsourced fashion. For example, one of our teacher in our alma mater, Sharif University, would take the videos on the USB and took it to a very remote area of Sistan Balochistan and just distribute it. And the teachers who would download the video themselves, and at that time just write them on CD and distribute it among their students. And to this day, I would receive emails from students who said, thank you so much. Because of Class Dars X and Y courses, I was able to finish my high school and continue to undergraduate. And there was one email that particularly stayed with me that was from the student who said, due to the disability, he couldn't go to any high school in Isfahan. It is not even a remote area. And because of the Class Dars, they were able to study high school and go to undergrad. That is just very meaningful, even if when it's coming from one person, it was really change and just warm your heart.
That's wonderful to hear. What were some of the sort of challenges that you experienced when you were designing the, both educational sort of and maybe structural while you guys were working on the project and sort of continuing through?
Of course. The first challenge was starting Khan Academy Farsi quite different from Khan Academy in other languages, because at that time when we reached out to South Khan, when we said, oh, we want to have the Farsi version, the idea of Khan Academy organization was that, great, so you would take the Khan Academy original video and you would sub them, add subtitles. My reaction, although I didn't say it out loud, I was young, I wasn't that daring, that it is stupid. This is cognitive overload, and that has this assumption that a lot of students in remote areas that particularly we were interested in impacting them would know English. That is not the case. Also, the other thing is that the curriculum in high school in Iran is quite different from the US. So we had to develop the video tailored for the population in Iran based on the curriculum in Iran, and all in Farsi, not in English with subtitles in Farsi. So that calls for us to go back, the 4 of us who are teaching, go back looking at the high school textbooks and based on that create videos. And we were very well aware that the lecture is far most away from the most effective method of teaching. So we're thinking how we can create this lecture style video, but making it engaging. So we try to include problems. We wouldn't just, have the straight lecture, but we would have problems. We try to make it engaging. Even, small details of how energetic our voice should be, because we thought, okay, as I'm talking, I would record it. Turned out it would ended up very boring. So we had to practice some voice talent that we didn't know about. Small things like that. You have to have a wide smile on your face and talk very energetically to record a video that someone would listen for 8 minutes. These are small details on creating them. But because we were creating these videos for Iran, we would also face a lot of challenges. That YouTube was filtered in Iran. It is hard to provide services from the US to Iran. So we have to look into to apply for permission to record those videos and put it online. And we were lucky at that time that we received support from the community, but it was quite challenging to do all the works while all of us were graduate students, but definitely fruit-feeling and reform.
Yeah, and I think that sort of brings us to another angle of while you were doing this, you were also doing graduate research, and I'm interested sort of in delving a little bit into what you were doing there, as it relates so I think well to what we're interested in. I know that sort of in your graduate work you examined how people part of what you were doing in graduate school is examining how people approach solving sort of novel, complex tasks, and how to sort of like foster an inclusive teaching environment. And I was wondering what some of the differences in how like underserved people approach these tasks, are in sort of inclusive versus, non-inclusive environments, and some of the sort of, ways that, we might go about addressing those difficulties.
Absolutely. Such a great question, Albert. And actually, we are just writing a grant to particularly address that question that I think 3 PhD students can get a PhD out of that. But I can talk about what are some of other findings that has caused us to look at how we can create more inclusive problem-solving environment, and why and what inclusivity, what kind of impact it would have. And so let me be a boring scholar and use a theory in education that there was a drastic transition in the way we teach when we realized teaching is not about transmitting knowledge from the teacher to student. Student is not a blank slate that teacher would write on them by just lecturing. But actually, learning is a social process that one would learn through constructing new knowledge based on previous knowledge by engaging in meaningful activities. So what does it mean for problem solving an inclusive environment? First, we need to have proper activities. And when I say proper activities, the activity that is well aligned with the background of a student, with their incoming preparations. I cannot, for example, in introductory physics course, give a physics activity to students and assume everyone have taken AP physics course and they would benefit from them. Because to this date, even here at Stanford, a very highly selective school, a lot of students have not taken AP physics. So by having an activity that does not consider the background of a student, their incoming preparation, we create an environment that a lot of students who do not have the required background would not benefit from. So one thing is considering incoming preparation, having the activities and learning environment that match and address the incoming preparation. The other thing, having a psychological safety is very important for learning. The way you engage, to effectively engage in a learning activity, a learner should feel psychologically safe. And that is a very important but underexplored area in education, because we have social psychology and cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology look at the academic aspect, social psychology look at the social psychological factors. But actually these two together really impact the learning, meaning that if I do not feel belong, if I do not feel safe in my learning environment, it would impact cognitively how much I can learn from the activities, from the things that I do. Then the other thing is about learning is about using resources. It's just that it's not about knowing the content, it's about using the resources to engage in the learning activities and gain new knowledge. And as educators, many of us have this blind spot that if I put the resource in place, people would use it, that would be good enough. And in fact, that is absolutely not the case. Privilege and background really impact the student understanding of what are the resources and how they are going to use them. I'm going to give a very, simple example, office hours. As an instructor, I would go homework and would say, oh, I have office hours, come to my office hours, ask questions. It turned out a lot of underprivileged students do not know what is office hours and how they should use them. They would not go to office hours because they are scared. If I go to office hours, I should show off how much I learn. It's not about me asking questions about my struggles. And it would take them too late toward the end of their undergrad that they would realize, oh, I could have gone to office hours and just ask questions and not be alone in my struggles. As opposed to privileged students who have gone to the good high schools and know the rules of the game, they would go to office hours and just keep asking questions until they are sure they can answer all the problems on the whole. So it's very important in an inclusive environment to make sure we put resources in place, but we explicitly and clearly communicate to all the students what are those resources and how to use them. The how is very important. If I would just say, oh, I have office hours from 1 to 3 on Monday, I have not told my students what are those for and how to use them. And therefore, it really impacts the learning of students. So it was a very long answer to your question, but I couldn't resist. It was such a good question.
No, that was wonderful. And it was interesting. I mean, I think I mean, part of what you mentioned sort of in terms of the inclusivity in sort of the environment, and specifically sort of within, you know, Stanford, which is like a very sort of like privileged place. And within Stanford physics, I actually remember that there was a big sort of difference in like in physics undergraduate classes. One of the sort of other sort of angles of non-inclusivity was in regards to gender. There was a, you know, at the time, at least, I think a very large sort of gender gap, you know, and I'm sure not exclusive to just Stanford, but you know, I think to sort of like, you know, broaden this a little bit, you know, I think we're seeing these sort of like large discrepancies in gender here, and also I think in Iran. And I was sort of interested in you know, in a broad way, sort of your thoughts on the gender inequality situation and in Iran, and maybe like that vein in terms of like what's going on at a national stage, and what we can do to like empower people through education, empower especially underserved people and through education there.
Also very good question, and it's hard to answer it shortly, but let me give my best shot. You know, when I came here, when I would say, oh, I have done electrical engineering in Iran, the reaction was like, wow, how did you do that in that country? And my answer to them would be quite something that they did not expect, that I would say, you know, I'm not sure if I would have been able to do electrical engineering in the US. It was much engineering to study electrical engineering in Iran than US as women. Why is that? And again, let me be a boring scholar and cite some of the very classic works in education. There's this educator and philosopher, Paulo Freire from Brazil, that he nicely distinguished between different types of oppression. There are two different types of oppressions, that they're both oppression, but they have very different consequences. Explicit versus implicit oppression. When the oppression is explicit, it is still paralyzing, but in long term, the people who are oppressed would get fed up and rise against oppression. And I think that is what we are observing in terms of gender rights in Iran, that the oppression is so blunt, so explicit, that eventually that everyone has come together and is standing up against this oppression. And I would say the oppression in Iran was also explicit in a sense that we wouldn't message to girls that you cannot study math or physics, or you're not going to be good at it. So as statistics shows, Iran is one of the countries that a lot of women study. Actually, Iran used to have the highest rate of women studying STEM. And the reason was because we did not have that message that the students would not, the female student are not able to study STEM. But we have explicit oppression against women that, oh, you should have this dress code in a school, you should do this and that. And after getting your degree, it's better to stay at home and being a good mom rather than joining the labor force. That is a very explicit oppression. But in the US, on the other hand, or some more developed countries, we have implicit oppression against women, meaning that from very early ages, we send a message that the gender is related to the type of skills, intellectual skills that one would have. That is started very early on. There was a 5 years ago, paper in Science that shows that by the age 6, girls describe more themselves in terms of being caring and collaborative, and boys start describing themselves more in terms of the quantitative skills. And that is as Kianjan and Elhamjan talk about it, is avalanche that throughout the educational path, these biases, this implicit oppression, grow and grow, and we got to the point that, again, here, even at Stanford, when I look at the data, women are much less likely to have taken math and physics AP courses compared to men, because they have, throughout their life, they have received this message that women are not good in math and engineering in general. So that is, I just want to put it out there that we shouldn't think that oppression is unique to Iran and we don't have it anywhere. We have it everywhere, but in different shades and colors. But what can be the role of education? That is a great question of empowering people, I think, and also one of the problems that we have universally and globally about education. Education ultimately should be about training aware, informed citizen that they are capable enough to grow individually and also contribute to the society. And it requires that part of the education shouldn't all be about content knowledge, which unfortunately, traditionally and historically it has been. It should about training informed citizens. It should about be creating mentally healthy and striving individuals. And all those aspects are missing. And also it should be about training learners, as Kian was speaking about, who have the skill set or capability of learning skills that are required to find a job and be productive in society. And also we are missing that part. So sorry again, long answer, but almost there. I'm done.
No, that was wonderful, and I think sort of leads into sort of the next thing that I was interested in, which is what, and as you mentioned, there's very different shapes in education inequality in the United States, globally, and in Iran. I was curious what your in your mind is the top barrier to sort of like or the top like couple of barriers to achieving this holy grail of education equality in Iran, and then like more broadly globally.
Mm-hmm. So I think I want to go back to Kian's tarbiyat and tadris. One of the fundamental challenge about education does not start at the age students start primary school. It start not only from the moment they are born, but actually before they are born. Any individual, the education starts early on. And the problem is, especially the early ages, it is left to the hand of families to decide what should be that education and how to educate their children. And therefore, you can imagine the drastic inequity caused in education. And by the time the students are into the daycares or school, they have received a very informative part of their education. Therefore, one of the challenges that we are facing in education is to make sure we start addressing inequity very, very early on. And sorry, I use inequity instead of inequality intentionally, because equality is about having same resources. Equity is about having resources that properly address the needs of each individual. For example, if a family is very well off, they might have very different resources. They might need very different resources compared to family that they are struggling to make sure their young kids are well supported. So one of the challenges of education is that making sure we have equitable resources from early on. And that is definitely not the case. Even in very advanced countries in education, they start early, but not as early as needed. And actually, one economist who has also won Nobel Prize, it has shown that return to investment in educational intervention is very much correlated with age. The younger we start education intervention, the more the benefit is. And therefore, the challenge is to make sure, are we addressing education from early on? Back to the word that Kian is speaking. There are a lot of studies that sadly shows the number of words a kid can speak at age 3 can predict their educational trajectory. And you can imagine age 3, it's very early on and it has such a drastic impact. So when I think about the challenges that when do we start addressing inequity in education, and the challenges of starting it as early as possible, but currently that is not happening, unfortunately. And therefore, the inequity has already shaped and engraved by the time they get to school and we try to address it.
Do you think that there's, there's obviously no, I think, silver bullet, but do you think that there are relatively easy things that we could be doing? In some sense, you have done a lot of this work with Class Dars, and especially in the last couple of years, there's been, and I think Kian mentioned, there's been an accelerated push towards online learning and ultimately blended learning. I'm curious about your thoughts about the current state of online learning in terms of if it is being used effectively for helping very young people, sort of match the educational gap, and if not, what sort of changes you personally think or would like to see that would sort of advance that more quickly?
Sure. I should confess, I am one of the skeptics of online education. So at the time, around 2010, if some of you remember, Stanford was all about online education. Our president at the time, Hennessy, was like that, it's a tsunami that is coming and we should be prepared and it will change the shape of education. At the School of Education, we were not on board with that. And the reason is, as I mentioned earlier, education is a social process, and the social interaction and being engaged in activity is very important. And at that time, online education was just replicating lectures that we knew it's not the best way of learning. And therefore, as a result, as the data start coming in, we observe that, online education is not serving the student as we expected. So at that time, the slogan of online education would be that, online education would improve equity and access. And when the data came in, it was like, no, it's actually, if anything, is doing opposite. For example, in San Jose State, the Udacity implemented some courses, and we saw that mostly underprivileged students would drop out of those courses. Those courses were only able to serve the best students who were already motivated, had the required foundation, and so they can engage in the courses online. For the online education to be a good resources, we really need to do a thoughtful design around it to make sure the social interactions and the richness of the learning activity is replicated in our online courses. And, COVID forces us into this global experiment with online education, because we had to rapidly change our in-person courses to online courses, and we learned a lot. First, once again, it echoed the message that if we just make online education about having lectures, it would not be effective. It is isolating. A student would not be engaged, and that would drastically and disproportionately hurt the less privileged. But if we use it thoughtfully with good design, it can be actually good companion and complementary component to in-person education. For example, I will give an example about what happened at Stanford and many other institutions. A lot of introductory STEM courses, the instructors started recording their lectures. As a result of recording their lectures, first they noticed a lot of issues with their lectures, so they improved their lectures to make sure it is understandable, it is comprehensible. But also what happens is that a student could listen to that lectures, follow it on their own pace, and then came to class more engaged and more prepared. And I have many students coming to me and said, if it wasn't for that recorded lecture, I wouldn't be able to finish quantum physics or that chemical engineering courses. And they actually, now that we are back in person at Stanford, a lot of students would come back and say, why we don't have those recorded videos anymore? We really appreciate it. The other thing is that, unfortunately, in classrooms, a lot of instructors, when they want to engage with the students, they forget an important part is having a frequent feedback from the students and feedback from diverse body of students. They would pose a question and just look at who would answer it. And of course, the most confident student would answer it and they would assume, so everyone understood me, let's go. As opposed that during the COVID, there was this chat option that the student would pose their question. And what we observed was that the uptake of a student posing questions, especially women, especially less prepared students, because they feel more comfortable posing questions in that format instead of asking it in a large lecture halls. So to sum up, I don't think online education is the one answer and that would rescue us, but if carefully designed, it can be great complementary for in-person education, but still we need a lot of investigation to make sure we use the full potential.
Do you think that, so you mentioned that in a sort of blended approach, it's been quite effective at Stanford in terms of, not necessarily focusing the person who has the most background and is maybe most able to take advantage, but rather to help the larger group, which is really who we want to be targeting. Are there examples of, do you know if, or do you think that this is something that will be reproducible in sort of like rural areas in Iran and the United States? Are there examples of sort of this, being blended with the social aspect of teaching in areas, like beyond sort of like the top levels of universities? Or do you think that that's something that's a direction that would be useful for us to go in towards in a future-looking way?
I think you're right. It's more of a direction to pursue in future, because before that, especially in the remote and underprivileged area, our approach is that let's provide minimum required, and that was the recorded videos, or as Alhamdulillah was talking about, having it on a tablet and distribute. That is the base level, but how to also having it be coupled with activities that they engage and receive feedback from instructors or mentors, that is something that needs to be explored and expanded. And right now we don't have it, or not that many cases that fully explore and other stuff, but that is a very valuable inquiry in future.
Very cool. And so all of this sort of together, I'm curious about if what is most exciting for you going forward, in the field of education. That's a very broad question, but so feel free to limit it to whichever scope you feel is most useful. But what is it that you're most excited about, the direction of the field, and are most optimistic in terms of addressing education inequality, in the domain of sort of underserved and like not included populations?
Yes, excellent question. I think the most exciting part, or what is happening right now in education, is that we are having a harder, longer look at what is the meaning of privilege in education and what is the meaning of equity education. We used to have the case that, if the students show up in a classroom, if I teach them the way I'm teaching, if they are not learning, it's their own problem. They are not putting in the hours or effort. But now we have become more critical of why they are not learning. And we have to shift from the mindset of student deficit, that something is wrong with the student, to more considering systematic deficit of what is wrong with our educational system, how we are leaving privilege on address and how we are actually giving room for privilege to dictate the path of the student. So that hard look is very promising, that we really understand how privilege shape the education path, and therefore how we can make sure to create education paths that are equal and equitable for students regardless of their background. That is one thing that is very exciting. For example, the word of meritocracy. It used to be, even 5 years ago, the educators in the US would carry that flag that, oh, we are meritocratic, we are great. Now it's very problematic to use that word because we know merit is kind of synonym for privilege to some extent. So we really look at what are we valuing and what is the goal of education. So one thing is questioning the problematizing privilege. The other thing, reconsidering what do we want to teach in a school in any level, because it was all about content. And it was about transmitting content from the teacher to the student. But now we realize education is about creating better societies, and therefore we need to reconsider what is covered in education. Are we preparing our learners for the jobs and the future of the society they would participate? Are we training them as an informed, engaged citizen? Are we providing them with the tools that they would remain mentally healthy despite the challenges they face? And especially the Trump elections and misinformation era give a very hard shake to this question, and making sure that we reconsider what are the things we are covering in our courses. It shouldn't all about content. It should be about training better prepared individuals to contribute to society.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for joining us and for all your insight. I know Arzu, I think, has posted here in the chat some link to your profile and your work, and I'm sure people will be interested also maybe in following up with you on some ideas. But thank you again, Shima, so much, and look forward to hopefully seeing you again in person soon.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for a wonderful conversation also in the previous session. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, same. Okay, I think we're moving on to the next, I don't know if we're having, I guess, a short break now, but I'll hand it off now to...
We had a couple of very good questions in Q&A.
Oh, sure.
If you have time for it, if it's fine, because I really like a couple of questions, and maybe she'll also find some.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So from the audience, we have, I think, a few questions here. Did you use any kind of intelligent teaching? We have several kinds of channels that affect learning and teaching, and in what way have you sort of considered them? I think this is sort of going beyond sort of online learning, but I think in terms of other ways to sort of teach students, how to sort of approach complex tasks. I think we're curious. I was curious about this.
Excellent. Okay, I try to be short and concise. First, one thing is that better identifying when someone wants to, I will narrow it down to the problem solving. That is the topic of my research. First, identifying qualitatively and empirically what are the practices and competencies that we want a learner to gain to be able to solve complex problems. That's one in the first stage of the research we have done. And then identifying that, okay, how we can design different learning environments and activity to make sure we have properly scaffold. By scaffold is a fancy word educators use instead of saying support, how we can properly support gaining those skills and competence. And finally, it used to be online education was the buzzword. Now it's AI in education. We look at how we can use AI, machine learning, deep learning, neural network analysis to use data that the students generate by engaging in different ed techs to see how good they are engaging in those skills and how we can give them just-in-time feedback to improve their engagement. That is the ongoing research, the latest stage of our research that currently we are doing. I hope I answered the question.
And I think for our last question here, we someone's asking sort of if we have like some sort of suggestion or some sort of, I think, interest in the educational field, like how one might go about communicating and sharing their ideas, what maybe would be the best way to get involved in this field.
So I have to pause and think how
besides maybe getting a PhD in education.
I can answer it differently depending on which stage of work you are in. It's just that knowing wherever you are, knowing who is doing the work, it would be really beneficial, who is doing the educational work and getting to know about their work. But if it is in the graduate school, you can always take courses, seminars. We, in a graduate school of education, we try to be very interdisciplinary and welcoming to students from different backgrounds. So if we are talking about graduate schools, try to participate in some of the channels we offer in graduate schools in different institutions. But if it is after graduate school, I think there are a lot of not-for-profits that would appreciate help and support, and getting to know the local ones and getting involved with them in ways that they need help would be excellent start point. And the thing is, as you dip your toes, it will just take you with itself. You will get interested in particular topic, and then you can more targeted and more focused follow that topic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for answering these questions, and thank you again for spending time with us. I think we'll go to Reza now. We're going to move to our next section for voices from our community. And thank you again, Shima.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Shima Jan and Albert Jan, for the great section, the great fireside chat that you had. Hi, everyone. My name is Reza Rastak. I am a board member of ISA, and also I'm part of the organizing committee for ISPS. We believe that education is an essential part of every stage of life, and it should be accessible to everyone, regardless of their age, where they were born, or their skin of the color of their skin. We saw that the topics that Kian and Elham and Shima discussed. There were amazing innovations and a lot of ideas of how to bring educational resources to the underserved communities around the world. And there's a lot of good news that inspires us every day to get involved. However, at the current moment, there are still huge challenges in terms of access to education in our own country of Iran. And I think it's important to pay attention to them and see the current state of access to education in Iran and the extent of inequalities that exist right now. today, we have this new section called Voices from the Community. And in this section, we hear from some of the members of our community. We have three individuals, Somaye, Pedram, and Niak, that talk about their experiences as they studied in Iran. And then we have the presentation by the Children of Mehr Foundation at the end of this part of the ISPS. The stories that you hear today talk about the challenges of different minority groups in Iran and some of the personal challenges that these individuals have faced when they were studying in Iran. In addition, it would inspire us to see that how they were able to overcome these challenges and how they were able to succeed in achieving their education, each with their own specific way. Today, Niak is also present at our Zoom, but we are showing a recorded video of him just because that to make sure that the audio is the quality of audio is preserved right now. Also, feel free to ask questions and post your comments on the Slido link that is shared in the chat. And I think without further ado, we can go to Somaye and start this section.
Thank you, Reza. I'm unmuted. Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, happy Saturday, everyone. And thank you, ISPS, for inviting me. And it's a great honor to be here and to share my story, not as an Stanford alum, but rather as an Afghan who spent quite a long time in Iran. And we know thousands of Afghans are living in Iran, and they are facing the same kind of similar challenges as I did. So my name is Somaye, as Reza said, and to make my kind of 30 plus years of life short, I was born in Herat, Afghanistan, during the Soviet invasion. And my parents' house was literally occupied by the communist regime. And then I was born, and at the same time, my father's business was kind of hit by a rocket, and it turned into ashes, and he lost a few friends at that incident. So my family decided to take a break, go to Iran for a short trip. That short trip turned out to be a 22 years stay for me. So, and I grew up in Iran. I was only 1 month old when we went to Iran. And so I grew up in Iran. I got my primary, secondary, and tertiary education in Iran. So before I proceed further and share my story, I want to say a few things about my family and myself. So I am from Herat, Afghanistan. So my mother tongue or native language is Dari, Farsi. So I don't have kind of a very heavy accent, or I speak easily the language. So the medium of instruction in the schools was understandable for me, so it wasn't a challenge. Second, my family is a Shia, they are practicing Shia Islam, so in that regard, I wasn't a minority. I could easily relate to practices in schools, and it wasn't a challenge. So we know that majority of Afghans are Sunni, so the experience of some of Afghans living in Iran go to a school is quite different from myself. Ethnicity wise, I am categorized as Tajik, or to be more accurate, Qizilbash Turk. So that also played in favor of me, my experience in Iran, because I could not easily recognize as my nationality is not recognizable, and people could not easily guess that. So I easily could blend in. And again, it wasn't the case for many Afghans living in Iran. my mother is educated, my late father was literate, and both of them were very committed to the education of myself and my brothers. I have 5 brothers and I'm the only one. So why they are important, I guess now after what Professor Salehi talked about the privilege and the role of family, you can understand why they are important, because I had that background, that kind of privilege. It was easier, my experience was much easier than a kind of a typical Afghan child living in Iran. Okay, let's go back to my story. So my story is not kind of representative of all Afghans, refugees living in Iran. I said that I got my primary, secondary, and tertiary education in Iran. It's easier said than done. The regulation around migrants in Iran were not as well established. So in the US or in many European countries, your status and the paths that you have and the kind of documentation you need to kind of progress. But in Iran back then in 80s, in 90s, it wasn't clear. So every regulation could change. Every kind of political turbulence, every incident between Iran and the whole world could translate in something for me. So every year we were kind of waiting to know whether we can enroll in schools or not. Sometimes this regulation and instructions came very late. I remember clearly when I was at grade 5, the instruction from the Ministry of Education came around the Solsa Aval examination, the mid-year examination. And by that time, I went to school. When the rest of the class was preparing for examination, I was there, and you can imagine if a 10-year, 11-year-old girl needs to settle in classroom, make friends, and at the same time catch up with the lessons. It was kind of a very difficult thing. I mean, when I talk about the immigration rules and the status of refugees in Iran, okay, as a kid I had my own dilemma, but the first important thing for a refugee is that they are not allowed to work legally. So that means my father was not around most of the times. He was traveling back and forth between Iran and Afghanistan to make the income. We were a big family, kind of a 7-8 member family. And so he needed to travel back and forth. He wasn't around. My mom was responsible for raising up 6 kids and take care of all the stuff. Including, making sure that we are in school and we are doing well. One of the things that I told you, constantly the instruction about the enrollment of Afghan refugees were coming late. But in addition to that, sometimes these instructions involved some criteria as well. So, I mean, probably most of you did your primary and secondary education in Iran. So you may change or switch 3 schools or at most 5 or 4. But in my case, I changed 9 schools. For primary education, I changed 4 schools. And why is that? Because those instructions came with criteria. They said the certain neighborhood, the certain kind of schools can enroll Afghan children. Shima talked about the, kind of new teachers should go to the kind of suburb areas, rural areas. And for the case of Afghan kids, they need to go to kind of underserved communities and neighborhood to get education. So if you are familiar with Mashhad, I mean, we were initially living in Adl Khomeini and Falake Barq, but then because of this restriction, we kind of find another rental place in Tabarsi and Tollab. And I mean, every year we kind of needed to move afar and afar. So it was kind of another restriction for Afghans. And you can imagine that my mom was supposed to find a home, and it's difficult in Iran, and do all the movement, and with 6 kids. So it was part of the struggles that I experienced. You know, the uncertainty about the future, as you can guess, was a kind of burden for me, because, you know, even you remember that title for composition, that what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't know, because I didn't know if the education for the next grade is granted for me. I even sitting at the concours examination, entrance examination for university, I didn't know if they later might say Afghans are excluded from the this year for enrollment in university. So that was kind of things that I struggled with. That I couldn't kind of vision for myself, okay, what I want to be, which field I need to study. So it was kind of I mean, I need to live at the moment and kind of be flexible and kind of welcoming of what comes to me. And so make it more personal as I reflect now on my experience. I really had I need to kind of hide my identity throughout my experience in Iran. I didn't want to be bullied. I didn't want to be mistreated. I didn't want to, you know, kind of excluded from the activities around the schools. And we were excluded because, I mean, my cousins, one of my cousins really wanted to go to Stanford or to those schools that were for kind of a smart kids. And she passed the exams, but then she was told that you cannot because you are Afghans. My brothers were very athletic, so they wanted to be part of the volleyball and basketball teams in their high school. And they were very good at that. They were excelling at that. But then they were told you cannot participate in the competition. So and because of that, I was trying to be good, conforming, compliant, because I didn't want to, you know, my identity kind of came and become an issue. I don't want to the administration of schools dig into my records and find out that I am Afghan. It's still hurting me. Why for that long period of time I hid my identity? It wasn't something to be ashamed of, but now I'm kind of wise to know that, but back then I was a kid and I was trying to hide that. Another as I said, it was temporary. I couldn't kind of plan for long. So I completed my primary, secondary, and also I entered university, and I did computer engineering at Ferdowsi University in Mashhad. And as soon as I completed my bachelor's, I returned to Afghanistan. Back then, it was a kind of democratic government at place, and so I did return because I couldn't, legally work in Iran. So I did return to Afghanistan and get a job, financially independent. As a woman, I was kind of doing well, and as many of you mentioned, I really hit by the inequality in education and how education is important. So I kind of got very passionate about that. So in 2014, I applied for graduate schools at Stanford. I came to the US, graduated, and right after I returned to Afghanistan and worked with Ministry of Education, UNICEF, and other international organizations to improve the policies around education and to make sure that children in conflict, children who are experiencing inequalities, they are refugees, they can, or in the case of Afghanistan, we had lots of internally displaced families, so they can get quality education. There were many progress. Education is costly. So the good thing about all our effort was that there are more fundings allocated to education. And but what happened in Afghanistan kind of forced me to move to the US, and now I'm living in Virginia and work and advocate for education from afar. So just want to say that we need to do more work in education, and particularly for migrants in Iran. And it was very heart touching when I heard the song by Shireen, and he included the suffering of Afghan children. I know the perspective and of Iranian toward Afghans changed, and it's really nice. And I hope and I pray for more equal societies, both for my second home, Iran, and for my hometown, Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Somaya. So you heard from Somaya as her experiences as a migrant in Iran. Next, we will hear from Petram, and he will talk about the difficulties he faced when seeking higher education as a Baha'i in Iran.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I hope the voice quality is okay. Right, and this is one of the very special gatherings that hopefully people don't have a problem with my accent. So that's very privileged in that sense too. Let's move on to the first slide.
Okay.
I was born 2 years before the revolution to parents which met each other at Tehran University. My father is from Shiraz and my mother is from Mazandaran. And they met in Tehran University when they were students. And I think I was supposed to have a regular childhood growing up, but soon after revolution, things did not stay the same for Baha'i families. As I can share some of my experience as a typical Baha'i family, nothing special about my particular family. I lost one of my shohar khales in Evin prison, another cousin in prison, another member left the country. My parents lost their job, and my father had to live outside the cities, had to live in secret life, kind of in a village, and then very few years later we could join him. And this is the typical situation of the Baha'i families. And next. Now I try to relate it to how it affected the educational system. So the Cultural Council of the Revolution, Shurای Ali Enqilab Farhangi, soon after they got together to thinking to reopen the universities, they decided to not allow Baha'is to participate or enter universities. And this has been the rules since then. And now we know that there are these secret letters that is discovered that it was very obvious. At that time in the early 1980s, it was not obvious. So Baha'is were trying to participate in entrance exam, filling out the forms, but of course they were getting expelled because on top of the form it asked about your religion. So this was going on for maybe 5 or 6 years, and then Baha'is realized that there is no way to get Baha'is to go back to universities. Just to give you some numbers, about the time of the revolution, about 70 some Baha'is were staff of the University of Tehran only, like as from the gardener all the way to professors and whatnot, is about 70 people. So those lost their job, and the Baha'is were middle of their studies. They couldn't go back, and then no Baha'i could start from the university education. So it was in 1986 or so that Baha'is gathered their professors or other people who were qualified to teach courses, and they say that, okay, let's start our own university, and it's called Baha'i Institute of Higher Education. So what that meant is that when I entered it in 1994 or something, I guess around that time, you have an entrance exam among Baha'is, so 10% of them or so would get selected, and then you have a couple of measures to choose from. I chose civil engineering because at the time the thinking was that I want to stay in Iran and I want to choose a major to be able to work in Iran more easily, and there are more jobs available for it. And the other options could have been chemical engineering, computer science, literature, basic medicines and whatnot. There were about 10 majors total, and a couple of departments offering these majors. So what it meant that in the beginning of the school year, you would get a bunch of files, a bunch of prints that says, okay, go buy this book and study this book yourself. And at these times, go to this house of such and such Baha'i in town and take the exam. Essentially, that's what it was at that time. At that time, our entrance class maybe was about 20 some numbers or so in civil engineering. And this is a picture that I found online of some of our studies together. This is the generation after me. And then every now and then we had to come to Tehran so this is, I entered the second decade of this institute, where the classes and whatnot were more established, and there was a little more freedom for Baha'is in some sense. And we could have classes. This is how classes were held. You would come to Tehran on a Wednesday morning, and then all the way to Friday afternoon, you would have one class after the other, and this would repeat every 3 weeks or so. So you would get a print that would say that, for taking physics class, if you take physics class, your physics class is Tehran Pars, and then if you have a chemistry class, is in the afternoon and is in Shahrek Gharb. So you had to find your way among and go between these classes. And this was my story for 4.5 years to finish civil engineering. But I have to add that it was not miserable years. It was very pleasant years. I don't know why it was, but the quality of the education, or it was not, of course, it has lots of flaws. It's not a school that is known to be high ranked by any measures, but it was very refreshing in some sense, because it was very unique experience. You see, you get your bachelor's in a setting that is very unique. Is also not everyone goes through this, that there is a little meaning behind just the education itself. So that was the education of those years. Go next. And then so yeah, this is the picture of I was fortunate that my father could afford to buy a house, or rent a house, sorry, in Tehran. I'm showing you the location of the house, which is close to Sarai Jumhuri. That's where the picture is taken. And it was during those years that I was studying civil engineering, but there was physics major courses. And then I kind of fell in love with physics. So I just couldn't stop reading and such. And this is the book that kind of got me into it. It was physics and philosophy. And toward the end of the education, end of the schools, I lost my interest in physics, in civil engineering, and I focused more and more on physics. And then next. Then I had to leave the country. So you don't have any student visa or anything. But again, I was fortunate enough that Hebrew Immigration Aid Society was helping many Baha'i refugees to leave the country. And here is a picture of us living in Austria for a few months with lots of Zoroastrian and Christians and Jewish immigrants, which this Hebrew Immigration Aid Society was sponsoring us. And although I'm a refugee, and because of being a refugee, I never went back to Iran in the past 20 years. But I have to say that our situation was not any harsh one. We were having a very happy life for half a year in Europe. Okay. So on April 19th, 2001, I entered Pennsylvania, where my aunt was living. And I remember, this is 2001, and I didn't have there was no personal computer or internet that much, or I didn't have much access to this kind of thing. The moment that I saw this Cathedral of Learning, this school, University of Pittsburgh, the building that my aunt told me get off the car, and I got it, and then I turned, I saw this in front of me. It was a very magnificent moment. All I was dreaming of, and I was hoping to have, it just become very much in front of me. And later on, I watched this movie, Conquest of Paradise, and the scene that Columbus sees the U.S., it's very much sees the land of America. It's very much reminiscence of those things, of those. Yes, and then I think I have 1 minute left, so we can go a little faster. After that, it was although let's go next. Then still the challenges that I did not have degree from a university was bothering me. But lots of administrative people had no understanding of what this institute is and how it works, and they could not give me a degree. So I decided to start scratch from again. But then there were educators like Dean of the Honors College, Alex Stewart, and Peter Kohler, who I become very friend, and they really helped me in a sense that provided me opportunity. I was able to win Barry Goldwater Scholarship, and you can see personal correspondence with Peter Kohler, who was a major physics professor there. And they really felt that it was the time, I can add this thing, and maybe I can stop after this shortly. It was the time that George Bush was getting elected, and they felt very embarrassed. You know, they felt their true American values are under question, and they saw me as a means to prove that American values, that this is the land of opportunity, should be proven. This is principle should still hold. They were so much worried about George Bush. I don't know in what sense or what was the thing, but at that time, that they were really working hard, sending emails, trying to get me resources, and they're asking about how I'm doing and whatnot, and just to prove that the United States is still the land of opportunity. So they remained very close friends to me since those years, and then life started getting a little easier on me in the United States. But I, of course, I had to work weird hours at one of the greasiest places in town, which luckily went bankrupt recently. This is a hot dog place. Okay, I'm not doing well in time, so maybe just quickly show the last slide. And then, yeah, sure. No, well, I think we went too far. Let's just start with here. So from 2014, I became member of the Google Quantum team, and in 2019, with this team, we outperformed classical computers, and this is where I'm still working, and I'm now. Very good.
Okay, it's Pedram, thank you. Is there more, or you can go to the
No,
next?
I think I'm going over time. I can cover stuff over the questions. I'm over my time limit, so I don't want to go through this.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we will go to the presentation by the Mayer Foundation, and we can start now, I think.
I'll go first. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, ISPS, and thanks everybody for listening. It's a great honor. I'm so inspired, touched, and great discussion. I'm Dana Karari, founder and president of Children of Mayer Foundation. We registered this foundation last year. We have spent a year, exactly since December of last year, we spent on doing some research and need assessment for creating some projects in Iran. I'm supposed to say a few more things, but because Mariam is catching a flight, I'll let her start the presentation, and then I'll come back and say a few more words. Mariam Jan Befarmi.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mariam Jan.
Thank you so much again for the opportunity, and sorry about the background noise. I am literally boarding a flight as we are speaking. But I'm really excited to be here and tell you about Children of Mayer Foundation's Project Bookstop. Can we skip a few slides to that, please? Thank you. So Project Bookstop or Iskay Kitab is our vision for scalable and accessible childhood education through cross-cultural educational programs, specifically for children in rural and underprivileged areas in Iran. Next. So what is the problem we're trying to addressing? As been mentioned by many experts already, childhood education is the key to sustainable societal economic development. And as Shima mentioned earlier, the earlier we start, the more sustainable it is. In fact, there is research that's shown that children's reading ability at early stages is directly linked to later on educational experiences and capabilities later on in life. And poor preschool education, especially in underprivileged and rural areas, has been shown to affect educational opportunities. Next. The problem we're specifically addressing in Iran is that children in underprivileged and rural areas face high reading challenges because of lack of access to public libraries, or even the existing ones are inaccessible. Only 1 in 100 rural areas have a library. And this lack of access to reading directly links to longer term educational access issues, and which leads to longer term cultural economic growth issues. Next. Next. One of the things that we are trying to do is create a network of sustainable childhood education for childhood equity. I'm so sorry about the background noise. And our vision of how we can create this is first through accessible learning centers, reading programs and cultural programs, but also empowering locally trained facilitators through economic opportunities. Can you hear me still? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you properly.
And beyond that, empowering the community as well as the local NGOs and families. Next. So we started Project Bookstop, as Danaja mentioned, a year ago, based on foundational research. We did a lot of work. We're talking to experts in the field on childhood and adult development, and specifically try to learn about what has failed in the past and what has not worked. And we have carefully selected the books and the learning programs based on the needs of the children. And not only that, based on their cultural needs and local needs. Next. Some of the local advisors and groups we've been working and consulted with, you can see here, Shorai Kitab Kudak or Muassaseh Madaran Amruz. These are just a handful of educational experts that we have consulted, and we try to sort the program based on sound foundational research. Next. Starting the Project Bookstop, as we mentioned, one of the first steps is actually acquiring the learning centers and setting those up. And we want to make sure that those are set based on the cultural needs in collaboration with local facilitators and volunteers. Next step. Another key aspect of this network that I mentioned for sustainable and scalable education is empowering local facilitators. And who are these facilitators? These are basic locals with basic education for locals through learning programs. And we specifically focus on empowering young women. And in fact, in our existing programs, more than 90% of the facilitators are women. These facilitators are selected very carefully based on our criteria, and they're trained in our reading camps, and then they are continuously educated through the programs that we have set up. And we will be conducting continuous oversight to make sure that these programs are appropriate, and we continue to update them as we move forward. Next. And Project Bookstop is just not an idea, it's already a reality. As you can see in pictures, this is an example of local facilitators in Fars province. And they are already setting up these programs, and we're really excited about the next steps. Next. We have, as we mentioned already, we have been working with local experts to develop these special programs, and we're happy to develop to answer any more questions or provide more details later, just in the interest of time. Next. Another key aspect of Project Bookstop that we mentioned was also family and community engagement. We want to make sure that the families and the society at large is supporting this initiative, so long term it can be sustainable and grow. Next. Where we are right now, we've been developing the programs as we mentioned, and hired some facilitators. Our goal for next year is launching 10 sites total, with 3 to 5 bookstop sites in Fars. The remaining later on towards the mid-year Q2 2023, and then we will expand from Fars to Sistan Baluchistan. Both of these our focus is in areas that are highly underserved, and Dana is going to talk more about that later on. Next. We are fundraising for this project. Obviously, some of this has been already raised, but the funds will be used for setting up library centers, operations, and facilitator training workshops. And as we move forward for the general management of this project. Next. And we also have been working on Project Yekta, which is empowering children with special needs. For the sake of time, this time we won't be talking about that, but if anyone is interested, we'd be happy to talk about that. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Danajan.
Thank you, Mariam Jan. We go to Danajan right now.
All right. Thank you so much, Mariam Jan, and thanks, Reza. Wow, this has been a great discussion panel, and listening to Somaya, to Pedram, to Elham, to Shiva, to all of you guys. Whenever I get tired of working so hard, I'll remember you guys, because this is amazing. We are all volunteers here. We have our day jobs, like Mariam is traveling for her next presentation tomorrow morning. I have lived, worked, and studied here in the Bay Area. I also studied electrical engineering, and I work for the tech company. But my passion, everything I do in life, it goes around the NGO work. I travel to Iran 2-3 times a year. Sometimes, without exaggeration, I directly go to from the airport to these remote areas. I talk to people, I talk to village councils, I talk to teachers, students. There are so many problems there, as we all know. So we come up with the best urgent way to help the education of children. I actually, it was a coincidence that I saw a tweet right now by by an educator that I really admire. He said something that I'm going to read to you so you get an idea of the whole education system. Most of you know better than me, but he says, I'll read it in Farsi first. He says, نظام آموزشی ما نیاز به اصلاح ندارد، به تخریب و بازسازی نیاز دارد، به هزار دلیل. کرامت انسانی در آن وجود ندارد، بر اساس نیازهای کودک نیست. کودک شاد پرورش نمیدهد. دستوری و از بالا به پایین است. خلاق محور نیست. جذب معلم قاعده ندارد. شیوه تدریس استرسا و اضطراب‌آور است. عدالت آموزشی نیست. So I can say it probably in English too. Let me see if I can translate it. Our educational system doesn't need modification. It needs destruction and rebuilding for 1,000 reasons. Here are a few. Human dignity is completely missing. It's not based on a child's needs, doesn't foster happy children. It's forceful and top-down. It's not creative-centric. Teaching methodology is stressful and anxiety-driven. There is no education, equality, or justice. So based on all these ideas, and the two last panelists are just a couple of examples of what is missing in the education system in Iran. And people like us who are not education experts, and we're volunteers, and we do this in our spare time, like many other NGOs here in the US. So we need help. We listening to Shima and listening to Kian, these two experts, this is exactly what's missing here in the NGOs, because most people are volunteers, and millions of dollars go to Iran, but I'm not sure if the outcome is sufficient. So with that, let's hear also from Azadeh, another board member of CMF, Azadeh Sanjari. If you could unmute her, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. I enjoyed a lot and learned a lot from the discussion today. Just want to add few more sentences because all well said by others. As Dana said, we've been established last year officially, but all of us, I can say with the confidence, all of us have been working in the Iran in the field of education for many years, more than a decade. And we get together because we thought we have the same mission, we have the same vision toward the education regarding children, especially from the earliest stages, as Shima mentioned. So we have established these centers in Iran in the area that they don't have access to education. These centers have people from the area, not just only the children, but the parents together, because most of these parents are young people that they didn't have proper education at the time. So these centers going to give them the opportunity to learn too. We're going to have the learning circles in the centers, reading books, other educational and game activity to grow and cultivate the proper education for these children so they can get ready to go to school and have the education that they need. I want to add some more information about the facilitator that we have in the centers. These are young people, very talented, that they are mostly educated, but they don't have a job, and they are very motivated to build the community in this area. So we gave them the education. We have workshop for them from very experts in this field. They can have this education, this workshop to get ready to pass this to the children in that area, so they can be the person of the interest, the point for us that they are working in this area and building this community and giving the kid this opportunity to grow. So with these centers, we are hoping that we can achieve these goals, and we can prepare these children to have a better future for them. As Dana mentioned, we need a lot of help. We need more volunteers. We need experts to help us to build a better and brighter education for them. So with all that said, Dana and I will be in the dinner tonight. So because of the time limit that we have right now here, we can discuss more about these education centers that we're building in Iran. But yeah, we'll be happy to discuss more about that. I know that there is one more presentation after us. I don't want to take that much of time. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to explain our work.
Thank you, the Meher Foundation, Dana, Azadeh, and Mariam. We go back to our third presenter, Niak. He's available, he's present at our meeting, but we're showing a video just to make sure that the sound quality is good. And Niak would also be present at our Q&A that's happening after the video. Niak is a transgender who, in Iran, and he's going to share the challenges of the LGBTQ plus community in Iran.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to this meeting. My name is Niak, I'm from Iran, and I'm transgender. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. Well, let us start with a bit of background about myself. I did my bachelor's in psychology in Islamic Azad University at Center of Tehran branch, and I graduated with a master's degree in psychological well-being and mental health from Nottingham Trent University, and I'm 25. I also LGBTQ plus right activist. I want to talk about some of my experience as a member of LGBTQ plus community. Some people might be wondering what is happening for minority groups in educational system in Iran. Minority groups like LGBTQ plus individuals are treated as second-class citizens. In Western countries, some biggest issues for LGBTQ plus individuals are like having gender-neutral toilets, while in some countries like Iran, there isn't even any laws to prevent gender and sex-based discrimination. In fact, school environments are heteronormative. The educational system promotes normative binary framework of behaviors and attitudes, according to which the normal student is seen as being heterosexual and cisgender. And sexuality and gender diversity is not covered in schools or is prohibited. As a result, many people like me have experienced many difficulties during their time at school and university. In such an oppressive environment, there is a lack of information about this individual's special needs. This unwelcome environment affects LGBTQ plus individuals' overall education and employment prospects. Also, school authorities discriminate against young people because of their sexual orientation or gender identities, sometimes leading to their being refused admission or being expelled. When I was a child, I didn't know I was transgender, but I know I was different from other girls. I had gone to same single sex school and I had to wear hijab. I was misgendered and bullied a lot. I was also regularly told by my teacher that I was sick and crazy. I was being judged for being a little bit masculine and not being feminine. To survive in this society, I also tried to fit in by having long hair, but it made me feel really uncomfortable. For example, school teachers and staff still gets asked some questions about my personal life and my body. And I was told that I would corrupt the other students, and the school authorities prevented me from participating in school activities with other students. Honestly, I felt like I'm a prisoner. In fact, transgender people whose appearance conflicts with their identity documents are particularly vulnerable to having their rights to an education denial in Iran due to the gender segregation that exists in the educational system. And they may be excluded from schools that correspond with their biological sex because of their transgender status, but they will not be allowed to register in schools that correspond with their preferred gender until they undergone gender reassignment surgeries and get new identification documents reflecting their gender. I also remember that in the last year of my high school, I was expelled from school because of having short haircuts and being a bit masculine. School authorities told me they could not allow me to sit in a class with other girls. I forced to go to special school, which was for just adults, and I study at home and come back at the specific dates to pass the tests. I also remember that during my university time, I had a physical education course, and the team leaders asked me some very rude questions, and they also forced me to take my clothes off to check my body to make sure that I'm not a boy. I had to answer the questions and accept all of their requests because finishing my study depended on it. It was really hard for me, but I believe students like me need to be able to walk into classes without feeling scared and have teachers and peers who understand that the identities and experiences of these people are valuable and natural. And I want to future LGBTQ plus individuals to go to school in a safe environment where they are able to learn without any barriers and marginalization. Thank you.
I want to thank all of the presenters of this section. We will now proceed with the Q&A for this section. So I ask all the presenters to turn on the cameras and we can start the Q&A. For the first question, I'll start with Petra. There are two questions asked from you. One is that, is BIHE recognized internationally now? Like, what's the difference between the recognition of BIHE before and now? And are the current Baha'i students in Iran, do they have it easier now? Is the situation easier compared to your time? And the second question is also similar, asking about the current educational situation in Iran for Baha'is.
Yes. So is it recognized? No, I don't think it's officially recognized. But however, I think there are a few hundred, let's say, United States. Probably now there are a few hundred graduates that are entered United States. So there are lots of universities or departments that are familiar, so people have an easier time. When I came in 2001, maybe there were about 5-10 or so of us in United States. So it is a different time now. And but if you walk into a university and say, okay, look, I'm a BIHE graduate, and they say, oh, okay, no, that is not happening. So it's still there are challenges, but it's slightly easier. You can say, hey, I'm similar to such and such person who came before me and proved herself or something, and then you can have an easier time a little bit. But I don't think there's anything official yet. The current situation, I don't know. I've been a bit detached. I don't know what it is, but I think if I want to say what worries me is the whole value of higher education and going to college is losing its significance compared to my time, which is 20 years ago. That, you know, it was very black and white. You got to go it, otherwise you have to go to Sarbazi or something. It was very much big wall and very much two very distinct behavior. I don't know thanks to who or what happened. Now this is very insignificant. In colleges, oh, you can open a shop, or I don't know, something, or you can go to college. It's I feel it's very different. It's not that much valued as it was at my time. And I think there are more institutes or going to neighboring countries and all that. I think it's a different time. So I really don't know how to compare them. But going to universities is still the practical constitution is that Baha'is are not allowed. Very few cases they go, and many of them get expelled later on. Very rare cases get to the finish line and they say, oh, look, they changed their religion from Baha'is, going Baha'i to Islam or something to create confusion. And sometimes they just to make up a couple of numbers. So you see all different cases these days to really convolute the statistics. But I think the overall policy is that Baha'is are not allowed to go to universities. Did I answer all the questions?
Yes, thank you, Pedro. Okay. And people are in the question, they said how excited they were, how moving your story was to them. We get a lot of
thank you.
Questions about that. Next, I would like to go to Somaye and ask about what would be your advice to an Afghan refugee who is studying in Iran? What would be your advice to a 9 or 10-year-old? And what would be your advice to an 18-year-old migrant in Iran?
So I said that I lived at the moment and try to kind of excel what opportunities that offered to me at that moment. So I didn't think, and for kind of 10 years, I didn't have that 10-year plan. And I guess it's the case for many Afghan refugees, whether they are in Iran or in Afghanistan right now. So the future might be very different from the crisis and the situation that they are living with that. But one thing, they need to get the skills that serve them later. As Pedro mentioned, right now, it's not binary as before, that you get education through the institutions like, university and, this path, one path. They can get online courses, they can benefit from different, and, earn skills that serve them. They might return, like my case, they might need to, migrate again, who knows? But the skills that they kind of obtain that will help them later, no matter what. So, and to the families around them, I would say, don't, this century is different from the 2 decades ago. So be more flexible with their choices and allow them to, explore the opportunities that they have around them. And of course, the policies around education in Iran is getting better to some kind of, at least now with legal status, they can enroll, and it's really nice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Somaya. We are to be more careful about the time. I would go to the questions for the Mayor Foundation. The first question is, considering the stories that you heard today, what are the specific things that your organization can do to help Baha'is or Afghan refugees or transgender individuals or the LGBTQ community in Iran? And the other question is that, how can people contribute to your organization? How they could be involved and help you in any way?
Okay, good questions. On about Baha'i subject, it's really something that I will be very straightforward and honest, that NGOs in Iran cannot touch. Maybe a lot of you don't know about this, and maybe I shouldn't say this for the sake of our volunteers in Iran, but NGOs are already under a lot of pressure from the government. And so they are watching us very, very carefully. So touching the Baha'i subject of education, unfortunately, which is most of us have that passion, it means that we're not going to be able to work at all. That's the least penalty we will pay, and I think it should be addressed in a different way. The different communities from outside Iran, I think, should put pressure on the government for that. About Afghan education in Iran, fortunately, it's way better. I mean, as I said, I work in the field. I go there 2-3 times a year, and things are much different for Afghan students compared to when I was growing up, because there is a lot of education about, you can probably see on social media how people are reacting to the news from Afghanistan. And there are NGOs like KCIS is supporting a school that has close to 300 Afghan students. And many other NGOs inside Iran and outside are supporting Afghan students inside Iran. So we are not discriminating against anyone. Whoever needs education, we are actually sending our facilitators into people's houses to make sure that they participate, because that's one of the things that many NGOs are facing. People are not participating in some of these activities because they're not used to it, especially the places we go to, the remote places. People are not used to, they're scared to come close and to get the services for free. They think we're up to something. Sometimes I hear, are you running for something in the government? Do you need our votes? So that part of working as a volunteer is very difficult. But again, using local people and getting close to them, using local NGOs, empowering them, getting in touch with people it makes it easier. So I hope Azadeh, why don't you also touch on that?
Yeah, I want to add to Dana's very clear answer about how you can help us about that part. I want to add more sentences to that. So these centers, we are not just going to send books to them. These are just part of the program. We have lots of activities that have planned with the expert in Iran and local people to empower children, to increase the power of learning in them. So the point is, with all these experts here, you can actually help in planning these activities in these centers for us. All the idea that you have, how we can empower children, how can we increase the power of reading, the power of thinking in these children before going to school, especially for like the age of 3 to 5, 6. We are covering people from age of 3 to 12. So it's very important for us to design these activities in a way that can improve the power of thinking in these kids, the power of exploring in these kids. This is very important piece for us. And also, as all of you know, for all the NGOs, like the resource of the money, people, time, volunteers, all this stuff is very necessary. But what we are looking for is making good plan, making good progress for these children. So we want to invite you all to collaborate in planning and thinking with us for building these activities in these centers.
Thank you so much, Azadeh and Dana. I would like to go ahead and ask questions from Niak. The questions he has is that what is the number one thing that you think people can do to help the LGBT community in Iran? And also, are there any nonprofit organizations or NGOs that are involved in helping the LGBTQ plus community in Iran?
Hi, if I want to answer your first question, I can say that the most important thing in my mind is increasing people's awareness about the importance of accepting these individuals. We are here, and if people accept us, it would definitely affect our mental health. Because I'm working on this topic, and I know the importance of being accepted by family, friends. And another thing, for example, someone maybe don't understand how addressing people by their preferred pronouns, by their preferred name can improve their mental health. If people accept it, it would be really great and helpful. And the NGOs, I won't say the name of the NGOs, but because they are not really helpful. They have good access to money and they have got funds, but they are not really helpful. And this is why I cannot say their names.
Thank you, Niak, for sharing your story, and thank you everyone for joining us here for this section called the Voices of the Community. We have to go to the closing remarks of the event, but hopefully we'll see you around, and people that they want to be in connection and help or get in contact with any of you, you can reach out to ISPS. We can connect you to these speakers here. Thank you all. We will go to the closing remarks. Bitaja, I have a problem hearing you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, I think.
Okay. So I was saying, I'm very delighted to listen to all the amazing discussions today on the topic of education equality and feel inspired to do something positive for the world. We had an amazing conversation earlier about lifelong education with Elham Moore and Kian Katamfroush. We followed the meeting by having a fireside chat. We heard personal stories about from Pedram, Somaye, Niak, and I'm very excited about the work of Children of Meh to combat education inequality. Next slide, please. Are you sharing the slides? Okay. So for those of you in the Bay Area, we'll have a gathering later in the day at Shalizar at 5 p.m. for dinner, where you will have a chance to interact with the speakers, with the ones that are attending and other fellow community members. I urge you all to attend. And if you haven't bought your tickets, please register now. Finally, I want to take a moment to talk about ISA's other programs. Next slide, please. Yes, so one important program that will be kick-starting today is our mentorship program. This has been one of the motivations. I would like to work on using the experiences from our community and benefit from that. The idea of this multi-generation program is that I, as an experienced alumni, mentor you who are a current student to build a successful career. And then you mentor my kids, like high school, middle school age, to find the best higher education opportunities. So we are hoping that with this win-win relationship, we can connect 3 generations in a sustainable manner. And as I said, we'll get more ideas tonight and we'll sign people up for the program tonight. Next slide. Another important event is the ISA board election, which will be happening in March. If you're interested in being involved more and have ideas on how to derive our community together, we would love to have you on board. We'll be sending this, so please stay tuned. Next slide. I would like to take a moment thanking everyone who was involved in making this event happen today. It's impossible to list everyone, but I'd like to thank ISA and its partners, Iranian Students Program at Stanford, Persian Students Association at Stanford, Iranian Students of California, individual contributors like Babak Pahlavan and many others. Special thanks to our guests, Elham, Kian, and Shima, as well as Pedram, Somaye, Niak, Azadeh, Dena, and Mariam. But more importantly, the main thanks goes to you, the audience, for your participation and for bringing your energy. Thank you all.